Right now, the market is dumping, crypto is crashing, and everyone's wondering what's next. Is it more pain? Is the cycle over? Are we about to head into another brutal 2022 style bear market? Or what is going to happen when it comes to crypto? In this video, I'll be diving into why we're crashing right now and what's actually causing the market to dump. What we typically see after crashes like this. Does this change the long-term picture for crypto? Have the fundamentals flipped bearish finally? And is it time to get out? What this means for alt season and a ton more. Let's dive in. As always, none of this is investment advice. You should always do your own research. Crypto is insanely risky, and I am not your investment advisor or your dad. Okay, first off, this video is gonna be a lot less polished than normal, a little bit more off the cuff. I'm recording this on Monday, right after all this stuff happened. I had other videos planned another video planned for today, and I was supposed to be filming content for next week today, but I felt like this sell-off was so massive that it warranted kind of its own video where I dive into what happens and if this changes things for the long-term picture of a lot of the things I've been talking about for the last couple of years. Right now, macro is in the driver's seat of crypto. Crypto prices, crypto price action is being primarily driven by macro. This isn't always the case for crypto. Sometimes crypto's more connected to macro, sometimes it's less connected to macro. But right now, macro is in the driver's seat. And that means things like, what the Fed's doing, what the Treasury is doing, your rate cuts, QE, QT, all that kind of stuff is going to have an outsized effect on whether crypto goes up or whether crypto goes down. So we're going to dive into a lot of those details today. Now, the major sell-off over this weekend was primarily caused by two different things. First off, it tends to be on weekends that you have a lot less volume, and so it's just a lot easier to see these really volatile moves in crypto. And the second thing is the threat of tariffs or the fear of tariffs hitting the market caused a lot of fear to kind of brew over the weekend in crypto, leading to the sell-off. Trump announced he's going to do 25% tariffs on Canada, 25% tariffs on Mexico, and 10% tariffs in China. And I'll get into the details on that in just a second. But basically, because the crypto markets reacted to this in two different ways. First off, they're partially reacted to it based on the macro picture. So they think that that's going to be inflationary, or there's a lot of fears about tariffs being inflationary. If we see inflation rise, we're going to get less rate cuts. And so the market was pricing some of that in. And then the second way the market was pricing it in has to do with the stock market, actually. And so basically, it's the idea that if the stock market crashes, you're going to see the weak hands in crypto freak out and also sell, and it's going to cause a crypto market crash. Fundamentally, tariffs don't affect directly crypto, but they do directly affect a lot of these companies within the US. So a lot of companies import their products from abroad. So if we have tariffs, those companies are going to either have to pass those costs along to the customer, which would result in likely less sales because those products are now more expensive, or they have to eat the cost, which is going to eat into their profits. And so either way you look at it, earnings would be expected to go down, and that's going to be a major hit to the stock market. And you would expect that the stock market would price that in, and you'd see the valuations of a lot of these companies go lower. And so the crypto market was basically saying, trying to guess what was going to happen next and saying, okay, stock market's going to crash. Then because that people are going to freak out, the crypto market's going to crash because people are stupid, not going to understand how that works. And so they just decided that a lot of people, at the same time decided to sell off early over the weekend. And it just kind of was this recipe for just mass disaster. Now, when it comes to these specific tariffs, let's dive into the details. These are very special tariffs. These are like emergency measure tariffs. They're a very specific kind of tariff, and they're meant to be used as a negotiation tactic. So the point of these tariffs, when it comes to Mexico, Canada, and China, they're an emergency measure when it comes to stopping migrants from coming over the border and stopping fentanyl from coming over the border. And so Trump's saying, hey, if you don't crack down on the border on your side when it comes to these drugs and people crossing the border, Canada, Mexico, and China with the fentanyl, if you're not willing to play ball with me on this and really crack down on this, you guys are going to have these insane tariffs that are going to be heavily impactful to your economy. But if you are willing to play ball with me and you are willing to work out a deal, we can make these tariffs a lot less impactful and a lot less painful. So you can expect them to be kind of short-term or short-lived. And we're already kind of seeing that. It looks like just even this morning, Mexico is in talks to work out some sort of deal to kind of stay these tariffs. It's likely, as long as Canada doesn't shoot themselves in the foot, that they will hopefully also work out some sort of deal in China as well. And we should see these things kind of rolled back. Now, long term, I do expect Trump to go through the normal process and institute tariffs on a lot of different countries. Trump has held his beliefs about tariffs for a long time. Like if you go back even to the 1980s, he's held very strong beliefs when it comes to tariffs and how these things work. And I don't really see a situation where he doesn't implement some sort of tariffs just kind of across the board. But hopefully the expectation is he'll do that slowly and over time to not have such a massive impact on the markets. That's at least what people are hoping for. And to be fair, that is what his team of advisors around him has been talking about on the podcast scene, et cetera, over the past couple months. That's what they're advising him, and that's what they're saying is going to happen. So, but obviously we'll see how it plays out. Back to the crypto picture though, or like the overall macro picture. I mentioned that a big part of this, or one piece of this, this causing the sell-off has to do with the fact of the threat of inflation. A lot of people believe tariffs are very inflationary and therefore, going to cause this inflation scare, and we're not going to get all these rate cuts that we're hoping for. We're already down to 2 rate cuts on, the Fed projecting. And, if, maybe we get no rate cuts, or maybe we get like this horrible situation where we're getting rate hikes. I think that's what people are afraid of. I think the idea of a rate hike is insanely unlikely. And I think we're actually going to get more rate cuts than the Fed is currently predicting on their dot plots. And I'll get into that in a future video. But if you go back to Trump's first term, as president, we actually got to see what happened when Trump implemented tariffs across the board. Did they have an impact on inflation, et cetera? And there have been tons of studies on this. There's been tons of reports on this. And during Trump's first presidency, when he implemented tariffs, there was absolutely, unequivocally, no noticeable impact on inflation. What ended up happening is the producers ended up eating the cost. It ate into their own profit margins, and they didn't pass it along to the consumer for whatever reason. And the expectation is actually this time, it's probably going to be, they're going to have to figure out something because people are tired right now. Consumers are worn out when it comes to inflation and just the price of things going up. And if they're going to want to keep those customers, then they're going to have to find a way to absorb those costs and not pass them along to consumer. I don't think it's going to fly after the last couple of years we've had. And if they already made that choice back in 2017, I don't see why they wouldn't also make that choice today. Another way this kind of works out where it isn't inflationary, and this, I'm sorry, I'm getting into all the weeds on this, but I'm trying to kind of just explain it to you because again, macro is dictating so much of the crypto picture, is when it comes to currency weakening, right? So we saw when Trump announced the tariffs on Canada, we saw a massive currency weakening when it came to the Canadian currency. And a weaker currency is another way you avoid inflation because it makes your exports a lot cheaper. So now they have cheaper exports in terms of like the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar. Their goods are now cheaper to us as U.S. citizens. And that's another way you kind of avoid that inflation bullet when it comes to tariffs. And I actually have a really in-depth video coming up talking about the Fed, rate cuts, and just my really strong case for why I think we're going to see a lot more rate cuts than the Fed is currently projecting for a couple different reasons. Some of that has to do with energy and making cheap, abundant energy, and that's going to have a massive impact on inflation, much more than the Fed raising rates. And the second thing is deregulation and how that's disinflationary. So to kind of sum this first part up, my view is that on a macro level, when it comes to the Fed, when it comes to rate cuts, when it comes to inflation, I think people are overreacting. I think we're going to get more rate cuts than people are expecting. I think we're going to get less inflation than people are expecting, and that's going to be overall bullish for crypto. Now, as a whole right now, Trump is shaking up things on a level I don't think any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. Trump was basically elected under the mandate of him coming in, gutting the government, gutting the system, and building something new. People elected him wanting something different, wanting something new. They're tired of the same old kind of bureaucratic system that we've been going through. They wanted something different. They wanted a different approach and to see kind of how that works out. And Trump is definitely delivering on that promise. He's shaking things up. We have Elon with Doge coming in and cutting massive amounts of costs. We have a lot of government workers getting this offer where they can choose to basically quit their job. They stop working. They get 8 months of pay or 7 months of pay or something like that. And that gives them time to go find another job. I actually know people that have quit. They worked for the government. They quit their job. And now they have until September to find another job. And all the while they're getting paid. And so you're seeing just this massive downsizing when it comes to the government. You're seeing this massive deregulation happening when it comes to the government. You're seeing a big focus on building abundant U.S. energy, cutting costs, trying to rebuild the manufacturing sector within the United States, and just kind of this whole different approach, nothing like what we've been going through over the past 20 years. And it's really hard to say how this is going to shake out for crypto and the wider markets. Trump is very bullish for crypto, and the regulations and the approach he's taken is the most bullish, like on a fundamental level, setup I've ever seen in my entire life. But in the short term, all these changes to macro, all this stuff, like it's really hard to tell how that's going to affect things short term. And I listened to a ridiculous amount of macro podcasts, And everyone's just kind of throwing their hands up and saying, we don't know. Like this is the formula is getting changed so much. So much stuff's getting shifted. It's really hard to tell how this all plays out short term. Are we going to have a recession? Is it going to be like this perfect Goldilocks zone where, everything goes well? Like nobody really knows exactly short term how it's going to shake out. But most people do agree that if Trump does succeed at what he's trying to do, if Elon succeeds with Doge, that if we see a lot of this deregulation, energy build out, et cetera, that it's extremely bullish for the markets in America as a whole. So it's like a long-term extremely bullish, short-term possible pain, but also possible not. So with that being said, so if you accept the idea that, because of all this shakeup, we can't with absolute certainty know, what's next, what's going to happen next. We have to kind of look at a spectrum of possible outcomes and see how many of those outcomes are bearish, how many of those outcomes are bullish, and what is the risk reward ratio, and is that something that we're willing to accept? And my personal opinion, looking at this and kind of looking at the different ways we can go, is that if you look at across the entire spectrum of possible outcomes, it is all bullish. Like all of those outcomes are bullish, sub like a 1 to 3% chance of something like a World War III or some sort of like horrible black swan event that honestly, if it happened, we wouldn't be worrying about crypto prices anyway, because it'd be just like the end of the world, basically. Outside of that, like sub-slice of a possible outcome, all the other outcomes are bullish. It's just a matter of like how long are you willing to be patient? That's my personal opinion. I have my money where my mouth is. My entire net worth is in crypto. I haven't sold this dip. I'm still holding, and I'm willing to hold for the long term because I deeply believe this. And I would happily sell if I thought it was different. If I thought the fundamental setup, the fundamental picture was bearish, and there's a lot of bearish fundamentals, I would just sit on the sidelines and wait. I have no problem with that. I've done that before. I did that in 2022. I was happy to sell. I was happy to jump out of the market. I was happy to wait and wait for the right season. But that's not the picture that's painted before us right now. Right now, the picture in front of us is fundamentally very, very, very exceptionally bullish. Okay, so here's the different possible outcomes. First off, you have kind of what I just laid out: short-term pain, long-term gain. And in that kind of scenario, maybe the first half of 2025 is just overall not fun. We see a lot of shakeups. We see some things break. Market is not fun. We do not do very well. But late 2025, around late October and November, December, we see the market start to pick up. We see that typical alt season that we're used to. And that kind of rolls into 2026. And we kind of have this really frothy kind of bull environment. And everyone's, back happy. We're back in the action. It's kind of like a 2021, 2017 kind of vibe. The second outcome or possible outcome is actually that this sell-off that we're going through right now actually triggers the bull run we've been talking about. So we go into an alt season in February. We have this epic bull run. It's business as normal, business as usual. We stick to the same 4-year cycle that we've been stuck in since the dawn of crypto. And that's definitely a possible outcome. It feels less and less likely the more time goes on, and the less alts perform, the less ETH performs, but it's still on the table. It's not quite off the table yet. And if you actually look back, every single bull run, every single move up begins with like a massive sell-off. That is very, very normal when it comes to crypto bull runs, and positive price action is actually that you have a pullback first. And I like to think of it as like price gaining momentum, right? If the price of crypto, if altcoins can't break out, sometimes they have to retrace back in order to gain momentum to break through that roof, to break through that top. We saw something similar with Solana really early in the cycle where it had this massive, just brutal sell-off that ended up being the best thing possible for it because of that sell-off, because it went so low. It was able to get so much room to run up, gained a lot of narrative, gained a lot of attention, gained a lot of developer mindshare, and it just overall really helps Solana succeed this cycle. And again, that came from a major sell-off kicking that off. And so, that's the second outcome. Major sell-off leads to a bull run. The third possible outcome would be that 2025 is similar to 2024 or 2023. Basically, we have good parts of the year, we have bad parts of the year. Overall, we make money. Overall, our portfolios slowly drift up, but there's a lot of pain in between. It feels brutal. It feels, on some levels miserable. But, as the year closes out in 2025, we're all a little bit richer than we are right now. And in that scenario, eventually it does lead to a bull run because that's all that's based on psychology. Psychology hasn't changed for thousands of years. Eventually, when markets go up for enough time, people get bullish. They start buying in. Enough people buying in starts shooting prices up, attracts more people. It's kind of this vicious cycle. The markets get frothy, leverage enters the system, and things start to skyrocket. Eventually, that always is the outcome. Always you have some sort of like bubble mania at the end. So maybe, this time we have a 5-year cycle or a 6-year cycle, or however long it takes for the retail to come back, sentiment to come back, and the market to build up that direction. Again, regardless of any of those outcomes, it really depends on your time frame. All those outcomes are bullish. All those outcomes ultimately end in higher prices, and all of those outcomes ultimately end in some sort of bull run, some sort of alt season, etc. As I talked about many times before, bear markets like what we saw in 2018, like what we saw in 2022, they come from a specific catalyst, and that catalyst is the bull run that comes before it. Because you have an epic bull run before, because prices go way too high, they have to come back down to reality. And they often overcorrect because they've gone so high, they then gain momentum to the downside and they go a lot lower than maybe they should. And again, that's kind of like the setup for the next bull run, the next move up. When you have a lot of leverage into the system, when you have a really frothy market environment, it becomes very unstable and easy to collapse. We haven't seen anything even close to that. People are the furthest thing from bullish, even at peak bullish behavior when prices are actually doing really well. Even just a couple months ago when prices were going up, people are still max bearish. And that's not the kind of behavior you see at a cycle top. At a cycle top, people are like permabulls. People are talking about the super cycle. Just overall sentiment is wildly bullish. You need the sentiment to be wildly bullish in order for the abundant amount of unhealthy leverage to enter the system, because people, again, believe things can go up. Only a lot of leverage enters the system. Things go way higher than they should. We have not seen that behavior yet. And until we see that behavior, we cannot have a massive bear market like what we saw in 2022 and 2018. Couple that with the insanely bullish, like long-term fundamental setup of crypto, and you have an environment where crypto just kind of tends to drift upward until it hits whatever catalyst it needs to go into that bull season. And right now, the catalyst on the horizon is first up, we have income tax returns coming in, over this month. That's why I'm not fully discounting the possibility of still having the typical 4-year cycle, the typical alt season in February. Maybe it's a couple weeks behind, maybe it's like a month behind. We still have tax returns coming. In general, people, maybe higher net worth individuals, are paying taxes right now. They have money kind of just sitting on the sidelines, waiting to figure out their tax bill, all that kind of stuff. Once that gets done, once their taxes are filed, they'll have money again to deploy into the market. So that could act, especially with the markets doing this retrace, that could act as one of the catalysts that'll shoot prices up higher. We, of course, on the macro front have rate cuts and the potential for surprises to the upside when it comes to that. So like the Fed coming out more dovish, the Fed projecting more rate cuts, inflation getting tamed more. Anything on that front is going to be bullish for the markets and act as a catalyst to the upside. So kind of coupled with that would be positive progress by Elon and Doge when it comes to cutting costs and cutting government spending. Already, Elon has massively surprised the upside. So even a lot of his supporters were saying he wouldn't be able to get done that much when it came to Doge and their mission, but already he's just accomplished so much. I think we're saving like $1 billion a day because of Doge. We're just 2 weeks in. I think he hopes to get to around $4 billion a day, which would be insane. And this is going to have a massive impact when it comes to taming inflation, which could lead to more rate cuts, et cetera. Definitely more confidence from the Fed that inflation's under control and that they're in an environment where they can cut rates. Another catalyst would be if we can't generate more interest for countries or somebody to buy our debt, we can see the Fed switch from QT to QE. Following that, another thing to look out for is unemployment on the rise. If unemployment is rising steadily, that's another reason for the Fed to cut rates. And we could see that happening, especially in the later half of the year. I already mentioned that I have friends who have left their government jobs and taken Elon's offer. We could see a decent amount of people take that offer and then maybe potentially see unemployment tick up later in September. Lastly, when it comes to catalysts, just overall watching sentiment shift within the US. If people start to believe that deregulation, that Doge, that Trump and all these things are going to lead to an eventual very optimistic outcome for the markets, the economy, et cetera, the markets will begin to price that in ahead of time before it happens. And so in general, like an environmental of hope and optimism is very, very bullish for the stock market, because if people are hopeful and optimistic, they're investing more and more of their money because they believe things are going to go up. And that's another catalyst for when you get a very bullish environment. Now let's talk about alt season really quick. Right now, everyone is dumping on alt season, saying alt season's not going to happen. You kind of have like the Bitcoiners saying, Bitcoin stole the show. Alts have always been trash. Alt season's not going to happen because people finally realized that Bitcoin's the only one true pure asset. And if you look at, Bitcoin dominance versus alts, it's been up only for Bitcoin, down only for alts. And, finally, this is finally the cycle where it's going to be different. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people in the meme coin sector saying, you know what, memes are the only pure asset, that Bitcoin's actually just one giant meme coin, and that this market's going to be dominated by meme coins. Meme coins are the only pure fair asset. it's good for everyone, kumbaya, we all get into memes, it's fair, there's no shady things that happen that happen in memes, and it's just the fun, pure way to speculate. When it comes to Bitcoin, first off, they say this every single cycle. Every single cycle, they're like, there is going to be no alt season. Bitcoin's the only true asset. Like, this is just literally almost to a T, them repeating history and the playbook that's been played in the past. Secondly, though, this is without doubt the most bullish setup for Bitcoin there's ever been. Bitcoin is basically achieving and fulfilling all the dreams every Bitcoiner has had since the inception of Bitcoin. Things that people would have told you were impossible, Bitcoin is currently in the process of doing, and where nation states are buying it and all this kind of crazy stuff. And so I think when it comes to Bitcoin specifically, one of the problems you're having is that people just believe Bitcoin can go a lot higher. And the reason you get an alt season is when Bitcoin's kind of tapped out, like when it's topped out to a price where people feel like it's too expensive, that's when they start to rotate downward. And until people feel like that, they're going to continue pouring into Bitcoin. And people just haven't gotten there. The setup's so bullish that people would just believe Bitcoin can go so much higher that they're very happy to still keep buying Bitcoin until that changes, until Bitcoin hits that magical number, or that magical price zone that people start to feel like it's too expensive. People are going to keep piling into Bitcoin, and they're going to not really look for that secondary trade. But I have zero doubt that at a certain price point, when Bitcoin hits a certain price point, people will feel like it's too expensive. People will feel like it's overpriced at that price point. They'll feel like they missed out on the trade, and they're going to want to bet on something, and that's going to lead them to look down the stack. That's human psychology. That's an element that never changes. That's just how people behave. And the people's behavior isn't going to change anytime soon. On the exact other end of the spectrum, you have the meme coins claiming they're the only pure asset, and that they're like this super kumbaya, like fraud proof, everyone's equal kind of thing, which is total nonsense. Meme coins are the furthest thing from a pure asset, and they've been massively parasitic to the ecosystem as a whole. The vast majority of people investing in meme coins are not making any money. They're losing money. The vast majority of people investing in meme coins are losing money. And I would argue meme coins are far more rigged than altcoins ever were. A lot of these things are pumped and dumped by influencer cabals. A lot of them are pumped and dumped by market makers. There is so much shady and scammy behavior that happens in meme coins. It's like taking all the worst elements of crypto and putting it into like one asset sector. And that's what we've seen play out over this meme coin cycle. It's also beginning a lot harsher and a lot more brutal. You'll notice that like early meme coins like Doge has lasted like a decade. I mean, it's been around for forever. Okay. And then even early in like the meme coin season, we had things like WIF and Pepe. And those things were relevant for months and months and months. But each like successive like wave of meme coin cycles, you've noticed happens a lot quicker, and things are rotated in and out a lot quicker. For example, the president of the United States launched his meme coin just a couple weeks ago, and now people don't even talk about it. The problem with meme coins is initially when meme coins were started, not a lot of people had the skills maybe to launch one of these things. And so they were still kind of special and unique, and it wasn't like overly diluted. But as time has gone on, it's become easier and easier to launch meme coins, and more have been launched. And it's gotten to the point where on pump.fun, you can launch a meme coin literally as easy as making a Facebook post. So as you have more and more meme coins being launched, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of meme coins being launched, you have to have a way to filter through those meme coins, because they're basically all the exact same thing. And this leads the market overall to look for differentiating factors. And in the start, these are always going to be kind of like gimmicky things. We saw this kind of with pump.fun a couple of months ago with their live streaming. People were doing like crazy different live streaming things to kind of separate themselves. And then it kind of evolved into this whole AI agent kind of narrative, which is kind of like a little bit of an evolution of the meme coin narrative, where again, it was kind of gimmicky things that aren't really useful, but kind of brought a lot of like wow and a lot of excitement to like people being like, wow, I can't believe AI is doing this. It was a way for these kind of mimetic assets to differentiate themselves from other mimetic assets, because they could do these unique things that were different from your typical meme coin. But again, you saw it was quickly kind of copied. Like the bar still was pretty low. Like pretty much anyone could still jump in and do something like this. And people quickly did. So we saw a lot of like AI agent type assets hit the market as well. Although obviously a lot less than just pure meme coins. And what you'll see over time in order to distinguish themselves is these meme coins will continue to climb this ladder, trying to make themselves more unique, more special, and basically trying to separate themselves from the pack by doing harder things that your average meme coin can't. And meme coins will keep doing this. They'll keep adding more and more utility until they're basically like a vaporware crypto project, right? And at a certain point, the market will wake up and realize that meme coins are slowly just evolving into alts. They're slowly just evolving into utility coins. And the market already has a ton of these utility coins that have been around. They've stood the test of time. They have revenue. Some of these projects have millions and millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue. And you'll see capital rotate its attention towards those alts. And that's because building a real business and building real innovation is a natural barrier to entry. This separates certain tokens and certain projects from the rest of the projects and gives focus to capital. And in a market where you have millions and millions of tokens launching, you need something to differentiate which tokens to invest into and which tokens to not invest into. That is where I believe meme coins are heading. I think a lot of people are really getting burnt out of meme coins. That game is getting harder and harder. I mean, you're basically having to jump in a token and like sell it just a couple hours later if you want to make any money, because the rotation between these things is getting absolutely unhinged, where, just within 24 hours, you could have a token go up to a couple $1 million in market cap and then retrace all the way back to zero. If you contrast that with alts almost never revert back to zero. Even some of these older alts that are basically zombie coins are still sitting at like hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of dollars in market cap. Alts grow over much longer periods of time, and as we've seen, some alts have grown cycle over cycle over cycle, and they're a lot better way for people to invest and actually make money versus something like meme coins. And I personally believe if you look at from the Bitcoin side of things, or you look at from the meme coin side of things, alt season is inevitable. Eventually, the market always gets there, and I don't believe this time is going to be any different. And to clarify, when I talk about alt season, I'm not talking about all altcoins. It's not like every single altcoin on the planet, every altcoin from last cycle or past cycles, or a lot of these dead altcoins. It's not like all of them are going to go up. I'm talking about the altcoins that either sit in category A, where they have a ton of utility, they have a ton of like good fundamentals, they're producing revenue, they're widely used, they're actually very innovative and entrenched within the crypto space. Those alts are going to do good during an alt season. And then the second category would be alts with a really strong narrative. Alts that are building something real, they're building something genuine, and they're able to infect a lot of mindshare because they have such a powerful and strong narrative. I believe those two categories, and that's probably 1% of all altcoins, I believe that those two categories are going to be where a lot of the capital focuses. And I believe a ridiculous amount of money is going to be made within that sector once attention rotates back to it. Overall, it is my deep belief that crypto is heading to over $100 trillion in market cap in the long haul, and we are just getting started. That is a ridiculous amount of upside attention. You have people like Larry Fink from BlackRock talking about how tokenization is the future. You have the president of the United States talking about how he's going to make America the crypto capital of the world. You have talk of a Bitcoin strategic reserve and a digital asset national stockpile. And you have Wall Street full force jumping into crypto, regulation flipping favorable. There are so many bullish catalysts on the horizon, it hurts. And I have a video coming out, I don't know if it's going to be next week or the week after, where I go into all these things. I talk about why crypto, I present the whole case, my bull case for why crypto is going to go to $100 trillion and higher, why inevitably we are going there in the long haul, and why today we are just 3% of the way there, and that those who are successfully able to ride this crypto wave up over the next decade to $100 trillion are just like set to make unprecedented amounts of money. We are still so early when it comes to the big picture of crypto, and I'm still insanely bullish long term. As always, again, none of this was investment advice. None of this was me telling you to buy crypto or anything like that. Crypto's risky. You should always do your own research, and I'm not your investment advisor. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comments below. And if you kind of like videos like this, where I do an update after maybe a major market move or major market event, let me know, and maybe I'll do a little bit more of these. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.